One. There's quite a list here. How many people do we have?
We've got about 32 in the room now.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So hopefully, yeah, the Padlet's filling up. That's great. Different resources, different ideas. Yeah, we certainly have some of those. Someone doesn't know anything. That's why we have parts 1 and 2. Hopefully you can attend both. Yeah, making it realistic. Yeah, that's in real life experiences, sure. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll give another minute to be able to do that, and we'll get going, because there's lots of information I wanted to share, in fact. Yeah, a lot of you are new to this, so yeah, we're going to start from the bottom up, so you came to the right place. Yeah, I think we should start now. Yeah, so welcome to the Virtual Field Trip NetQuest webinar. Um, hold on, my screen's kind of wonky. Yeah, and what I want to do is have you guys set up and create your own web quests. Not now, but I want to give you instructions to do that. This is part of a series that I'm doing for adapting ELL strategies into the classroom. Again, my name is Frederick Lim. Let me thank NICE TESOL for their platform for me to be able to do this. If you haven't joined already, please do so. You can go to the website and join up here for $20.20. You can join and have access to all these resources to help you with your English teaching. So a little bit about myself. I'm an ELL coordinator at a middle school in Harlem, New York. I've been in the same school for 10 years. I co-plan with teachers with their ELL strategy issues. I mentioned before that I'm a member of NICE TESOL and the Bilingual Special Interest Group, and I'm doing a lot of training for teachers to measure the impact of the ELL strategies in their classroom. My contact information is there, and I want to also point out that some of the resources that I'm presenting to you come from these teaching opportunities that I've had to, that I had been given to me, like in terms of grants. One is the Fulbright Distinguished Award in Teaching grant in Mexico. And most recently, last summer, I was in Hanoi and in Beijing teaching these groups of English teachers, well, how to implement ELL teaching strategies. And that came from a year of presenting workshops to teachers in New York with the New York City Men's Teach program, which was quite successful in training teachers in different subjects on how to apply ELL strategies. My point is that you can do more realistic things with whatever you're teaching, even on an online platform. Our agenda today is for you to take a look at the benefits of NetQuests and visual trips, how to plan them, how to set them up, and hopefully we can set a better stage for part 2, which is next week, focusing on science and math. Our backdrop picture here is a collage that I created on one of our scavenger trips to Central Park. This is also a type of trip. I'm sure you guys do this too with your kids. Um, Unfortunately, we can't do that this year, but it's good to remember these things. All right, so if you are just coming in, there's a Padlet. I wanted to point out that the third item here is a teacher training wish list for an online course that I'd like to put together for you to help you through the summer and into next year. It would be really helpful for you to fill that out so I know what you need. All right, so let's get into the benefits and some tips on field trips and NetQuests. The word NetQuest is more of like a rebranding of what was called the WebQuest before. If you call an assignment like a quest instead of research, I think these students would have more buy-in into it. The NetQuest, of course, is a search or a quest for fill in the blank, and it's up to you to fill in the blank. You need to keep it open enough so that learners discover knowledge for themselves. And you give them small tasks to do to have something at the end to show. Learners then reflect on the issues that they found and based on the information that they gathered, and they arrive at solutions that I'm sure are going to be different for all students because everyone has a different perspective. But then hopefully they can bring that knowledge into the future when they have to look at issues again. If you plan it out right with the right type of issues, it'll be implanted in their head and somehow it'll sprout ideas later when they're in positions of influence. What's really good about a NetQuest is student engagement. This is better than a worksheet, of course, because you have them actively looking for things that they're interested in. Their learning tends to be more memorable, and they're seeking something more valuable to them and their topic than something that you might think is valuable, if that makes sense. And of course, they're reaching conclusions in different ways. Our backdrop here is some pictures I took in Hanoi. And again, this type of thing, I'm showing these to you to show the different types of places that you can have them think about, like the statue of Lenin. Why is he there? You know, he's a Russian person. Why would he be in Vietnam? And it wasn't for vacation. All right, another hint would be encouraging teamwork among your students. This cultivates more of a like creativity for them because some students, as you know, work within their sphere of what they know. So for example, you can assign one student to do some part of the research. One can work on the presentation's introduction. Another one can work on the conclusion. The other one can work on more of the art-related things for a group presentation. Again, this foments a creativity and subjective reasoning because they get to choose, and also gives them some autonomy in the decision-making process. This backdrop here is actually a collage of students making a collage. It's supposed to be like a gift for the school in Peru that I went to visit one summer as part of the Fulbright Hayes Award that was given to some teachers who applied. Now, a lot of you came for field trips, so I'm going to take you on an example, very simple field trip before we get into a more complicated field trip. There are plenty of resources on the internet that you can make your own now. You can mix and match, and you can plan these for one period as sort of like an introductory to a larger web quest or a net quest, or you can just have them as a standalone, something interesting. This template I got is from the Microsoft Visual Field Trip template that I linked here. We can watch the field trip now if this lets me click on it, and it does. I was so impressed by it that I put it on my blog, which is here. And you can see that these are some of the countries that I want to do this type of thing with. But I did this in a matter of like 3 hours. I used my own pictures when I went to Budapest in Hungary one April. And I set it on, oops, sorry. I'm trying to make this as visually appealing as possible. So let me just make it like that and leave it alone. So Budapest and Hungary, comparing them, 1 week in 2 world cities. This Parliament building I thought was really fascinating. So I asked the question, when was it finished and what architectural styles are represented in this famous building? The answer is, well, 1904 and Gothic, Baroque, Renaissance. This is a picture of the back of the building. There's a lot of difference there. One interesting thing is that the Holy Crown of Hungary sits in the center of this building. And I asked, who was the last one to wear this? I took a short clip of walking across the Charles Bridge. And my simple question is, what do you see people doing? These questions are good for the beginning elves, like they can say something in the present progressive, like they're playing music, they are walking, they are holding hands. It's a sunny day, which isn't progressive, but it's also practice on like the weather and just seeing things, people moving around, more dynamic than just a slide. Contrast of old and new. Also about the bridge, when it was constructed, what's it for, which river runs under the bridge, what's it made of. This astronomical clock was fascinating to me as well, like when was it made, what are some of the striking things about it, like telling time 4 ways. That was such a short trip that I would love to return to Prague and Budapest again, because 1 week was not enough. But this is an example then of a short little field trip that you can take your kids on. But I'm sure you want to know a little bit more about the complexities of doing this, so I'm going to keep sharing. Let's see. All right. For a more elaborate co-planned NetQuest, you're going to have to solicit the help from your area teachers. Now, if you're taking notes, the first 3 steps of the 6 I'm going to show you today are these. So one is to obtain your subject plans, and the next is to choose an anchor subject, and 3 is to precipitate a theme from those plans and anchors that you've gathered. Let's see how that works. Now this is my planning grid when I started. You can see that the plans are here. I linked them through for ELA, Social Studies, Science, and Math, and I added a column for the language acquisition portion, okay? We'll get to the standard next, but I wanted to point out that the theme here, I anchored to the ELA subject of the cultural representation of Mexicans. This is what they were studying this week, and before that it was Native Americans, and before that African Americans. So it's very timely that they had this type of theme. In social studies, it was an age of exploration, so they were doing exploration around the world, but to have this more focused on the theme about Mexico, I chose to have them focus on those explorers who were in Mexico and Latin America. And in science also, I'm going to talk about this next week, of course, but these science and math concepts can fit basically into whatever theme, actually, because you're dealing with numbers and you're dealing with physical properties. Great, so you start with that. In ELA, just to dig a little bit deeper, their learning target was to compare and contrast representations throughout the history. So looking at different authors, you have to choose related Mexican authors, for example, or people who wrote about them, and contrast them to others who wrote about the same thing. And in social studies, they are comparing to explorers from the age of exploration. So those who were around Mexico were Cortez and Columbus, of course. Now, what does this mean? Well, you look at all of this and you think, okay, what theme can we derive from this? Well, there's Mexican culture, different representations of people. So you're thinking immigrant families, workers, for example, and you're thinking already activists like Tecumseh, for example, pictured here for Native Americans, and Fanny Hammer, pictured here, Chavez here, Malcolm X, of course, and whether or not Cortez was an advocate, you can also create examples of how people are not advocates, right? And what they did to influence either negatively or positively the countries that they explored. So those were the first three things. Now the next part would be to choose your end product. That's kind of like more fun for you because you can give students a choice on which products that you'd like them to present their information. Number 5 has to do with assessment. How do you assess them for a grade? Do they reach the standard? And the last part, and it seems counterintuitive, but you plan your lessons toward the end because you have to find out where they're going and you can plan backwards. So let's take a look at these 3. Back to the grid. The theme necessarily went for something like a social activism product. Okay, so there are many movements in terms of civil participation or civic participation that the students can draw from, and they can draw from their cultures as well, because things in Yemen have to do also with civic participation, what happened there. I think I'm getting ahead of myself, but you can see that this is kind of a broad topic, but it's still a focused topic. The assessment has to do with the standard, of course. But before I get into that, I wanted to show you examples of products. So you can have them do a podcast, for example, or a video, a short video. You can have them do a slide presentation. You can turn those slides into videos. Presses are good. They can keep a journal. Also, if they're more into writing, they can create a poster. They can create an essay if they're really fond of essays. They can do a type of Padlet. They can do a type of blog posts. I'm going to show you a picture of a video that I created for the Mexican project that I went on, and it has to do with speaking practice because I wanted my students to do more speaking practice. So this is like the introduction commercial to that project.
Hi, English teachers. You plan to teach your students how to speak, but in every class, students fail to understand why storytelling skills are so important. You try to explain the details, but you only hear crickets. In old school English lessons, students recite and memorize in class. This is not authentic storytelling skills. Students want to learn new information and are motivated to share if it's important to them. Is there a way to get students to learn how to interview, collect information, and share their significant story willingly with their peers? Yes, there is. It's the First Heroes Project, a simple, super engaging way to keep students' attention through planning, producing, and presenting their stories digitally. First Hero shows students exactly why a compelling digital story deserves their attention and effort. To share their stories on social media, First Hero shows them how to present their motivating story from their laptop. Join our growing First Heroes network today to bring authentic learning to your classroom.
Okay, so much for that. Uh, so that's one way that you can introduce them to creating a story about someone that in their neighborhood or community is like a social activist. They can go and interview them. So interviewing practices speaking skills, and transcribing them practices the writing skills. So they're listening and speaking, um, and showing what they know through video based on their interviews. So these are a couple of examples that I show to my students. One is the one that I used for myself. Uh, and because when I started this project, students were asking me, can you provide an example? Well, I was just starting the project, so the only example that I could create was one of my own. And later, the students were able to create their own, and now I have examples for them. We do have a little bit of time, so I'm going to show you an example of what I did as part of like a net quest also as an introduction to what they want to do, but also informational about the relationship between Mexico and the Philippines. Hi, I'm Mr. Lim. My family is from the Philippines. The Philippines is an archipelago off the coast of Asia. It was occupied by Spain since 1521. Galleon ships exchanged products for more than 250 years. Many cultural ideas and people traveled between the Philippines and Mexico. After the Spanish-American War, the U.S. occupied the Philippines. Before World War II, the Philippines became a U.S. Commonwealth. My great-grandfather represented the Philippines in Washington, D.C. He was my father's grandfather, who had a daughter named Lourdes. Lourdes is my significant hero. She studied law in the Philippines and Spain, and she became a justice for women's rights. Now I teach and advocate for equity in education, for everyone, everywhere. All right, so you can see that Adobe Spark is a really good way that you can have students create their own videos, and it's absolutely free. I really enjoyed that platform, Adobe Spark. Now, the students come up with theirs. It's a little bit different, of course, but I'm proud of their work.
Hi, my name is Miguel. I'm from the Dominican Republic. There is a new president in DR, but there are criminals around the country. Imagine if there are no criminals around DR. I want to be the mayor. I will make laws to save in the country. I will build many police departments to protect people.
Good, that was just one example, of course, again with Adobe Spark Video. And yeah, you can see that the students put in some kind of research into their country. It has to do with social activism. It didn't get into the comparing. It wasn't part of this assignment, but I just wanted to show this as an example of videos that they can make. Okay, as I mentioned before, the assessment part is based on the standard that you chose, and I want to explain that in part 2. There's not a lot of time to do both of these parts, so that's why I did the splitting this way. But certainly the assessments is something that you need to look at before you plan backwards for lessons. All right, halftime review. These are the 6 things that I mentioned. Get the subject plans, choose an anchor subject, and get a theme from looking at all these lessons that you have. Choose an end product. Decide your assessment, and then plan your lessons backwards. That section is coming up. At this point, I've been talking for like 27 minutes. If you can go back to the Padlet and put in some things that you learned or are already taking away from these from the information that I provided you already. There's a lot of people who put on the Padlet that this is their first time. So after 28 minutes of knowing what this is all about, what did you take away? I'd be curious to know. So I'll give you like a minute to do that before we move into the lesson planning part. If you already submitted something and wanted to start on the survey, go ahead also.
Can you put the link to the survey into the chat? That I don't have the link for.
Oh, okay.
The Padlet I've put in, but
To the survey?
yeah, that one I didn't. Thank you.
Okay, now how do I get back?
Just
Okay, I'm almost there. There.
there.
Hopefully
Got it.
you got it. Okay, that was a minute. Just going through these chats that I didn't see yet. Okay, creative, nice. Thanks for the comments. I didn't see a lot of new entries on what you've taken years, so thinking about it. Let's see. Let's go into the presenting now. The planning, I mean. Let's present the planning. Now you've done all this work at the front, and you know what you want to do. Let's do the planning part. What I do is apply these 4 holistic ELL strategies. They're basically language acquisition lenses that have to do with the rigor and comprehensibility of the language that you're presenting your students with. That includes like your teacher talk and also your handouts and in this case, the language you're using on your web test. You're using different modalities, which means speaking, writing, reading, listening, and also lowering that effective filter, AKA you're trying to make it fun. All right, so let's take a look at that. This is a process. You start with the standards first, because you're setting that bar, setting that rigor. For those of you who've listened to me speak about this in math, this is like kind of a review applied to ELA this time. So we have a compare and contrast standard, RI 6.9, where you're comparing different authors. You're collaborating with the teacher by having them set up their classroom. Hopefully you have some input when they are collaborating, when you're collaborating with them. But then you go in and refine their adaptations for the L's that you've worked with. Of course, you know your L's, so you know where they're starting from, you know where they're supposed to be going in terms of their goals. And so you try to make things comprehensible for them and improve the modalities and lower that effective filter, sometimes using their home language if you need to. But pretty much, if you have a standard there, you have that rigor part already checked off. All right, so going back to the grid example, the standards are here. You can see across the subjects, even into science, we're going to be looking into acids and bases. They have a standard for that as well. In math, they have the dot plots and data points, which is great when you're studying social activism, of course, right? You can see the applicability. In terms of the language acquisition, you can focus on compare and contrast words, like things are similar or how they're different. You can also get into the adverbial phrases after you teach them prepositional phrases, and of course adverbs. Let me show you how that works. This is a language acquisition continuum to increase the comprehensibility of your teacher talk. I got this from Dr. Collier, who put this together. It's on the internet. And it shows very clearly how your language should be formulated when you're instructing. Looking at the commanding, where they should be in 5 or 7 years, how long it takes for a student to get comfortable with the language, they comprehend general and implied meaning of whatever you're saying. Implied meaning is the key here. When you go back to transitioning students are good at comprehending general things, but then early production students, they know specific things like one-word answers, maybe two-word answers, but they're not really good at the implied meaning of things. So you need to inch them up or scaffold them up to the next level, right? Let's take a look at this a little bit more closely. For an emerging student, increased comprehension of general specific meaning, and you want to get them to transitioning, you can use things that they are already familiar with, scenarios that they already know, talked about the school or classes, their peers, the sports that they like basketball is really popular, things around family, shopping and laundry, eating pizza and ice cream. If you put it in those terms, that would be great. Of course, when you're teaching something directly, like poetry, then you want to highlight those words like poet, poetry, poems. In math, there's a lot of questions on banking. I don't know how many students get asked banking questions they haven't transacted with the bank, you know. And things on real estate and investment. Those are actual questions that I've seen in math questions. Unless you're going to teach those things specifically, it's better to replace them with words that they already know. Same with your web quests. Yeah. Here are some examples for entering students. Their skills are pretty much relying on pictures for understanding. So your web quest should be very photo rich, image rich. As they get into merging and transitioning, they can tell short stories with short sentences like subject, verb, and predicate, but not anything more complicated than that. Choose scenarios also that they're familiar with. Go back to the cultural backgrounds, like if you have a lot of Muslims in your community, then talk about the mosque or the hijab, traditions with that. They just finished their fasting in Ramadan. That could be related to maybe something that you are focusing on, like social activism. The Latinx community with the Mangu and the Mofongo in different subsections of the culture, which is Latin America. Mangu, for example, doesn't exist in Guatemala, but it would be interesting to know about it, right? In West Africa, where many of my students are from, the drum is part of the culture, so talk about that. What's it made of? Does everyone get taught how to play the drum or beat the drum? The kolanet as well. We have an advantage of living in a time where Google searches, you can search for anything. You don't have to go to Prague, you don't have to go to Budapest, but there's lots of pictures that you can take from the internet that are free license and use them in your web quests. All right, so the ELL adaptations would be something like this. There's the they have to be visual. They're building some kind of background or schema, and they are L-centered. If we're thinking about activism, we have to introduce students who might be from West Africa. What is Mexico? What is their culture? Let me see if I can get into this lesson. This is from the ELL lesson last week on Mexican culture. It starts with a gallery walk to introduce students to the different images that they would find in Mexico and that culture. The food is relevant there. Folk dancing as well in the costumes. The Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead celebration is very big in Mexico. And all of that, you can have them make an inference on the first day to try to get their brains warmed up to where you're going. Very visual, very appropriate for beginning students. Now, if you want to teach students who are more on the more competent side of English on that spectrum, you can reach for race conflict videos like you can find in a Crash Course, which is quite good. I'm not going to play that.
Wholesale University's art and design programs embrace design practices.
I just wanted to show you that it could also be
2 bachelor's degrees,
rich
PhD from Harvard University,
information.
2-year fellowship to
So you're just going to,
power that society gives it. For another example, let's stick with Billy and he's the in turn end up shaping those forces. He was the editor and intellectual driving force behind its magazine, The Crisis. The NAACP fought against lynching, segregation of schools, voting disenfranchisement.
okay, so you can have them explore this. You can see what I'm doing with the cursor here. They can stop and revisit information that they have a question about. There is a toggle here where they can have the words come up as a closed caption. So I think this is a good example of a resource that's made for students where they can get a lot of background on the race conflict and civil activism. Now, Jeffrey's project, another student, liked this topic because he can talk about his background as a Mexican American and talk about stereotypes. This was from a different assignment, but I liked his message.
Yeah, talking about Mexican stereotypes. The Mexican stereotypes started in the 2016 elections. These stereotypes were going too far. We Mexicans are hardworking. This is a hardworking woman in Mexico. I learned that Mexican stereotypes are wrong.
Okay, again, quite short. That was his capability. But he got the point, looking at stereotypes from a different lens. So be sure you have a lot of visuals for those who are starting and background building as much as you can, and have these projects L-centered for their culture. Right, and the last part of this presentation has to do with the historical background as well, moving into the social studies, activists and explorers. You can find a lot of articles in News ELA, and depending on the Lexile level of your students, you can select based on your topic, like activists, right? So there's lots of articles here that you can choose as part of your data gathering for the students. Like, what is activism? You can create an account here, and I believe it's still free. But you can choose the ones that you want them to look at, but also you can give them free reign on choosing articles that they want to look at as well. Animal rights are here. Civil rights are here. So that's a very good research tool as well. News ELA or Newsella. Again, here are examples of different types of movements. I won't show these, but they're still from Crash Course, like women's activism. It's a really good video to show background information on where American activism came from England, right? And then there's different ways that you can contrast different types of activism. There's nonviolent activism and peace movements and where those came from. All of these build that background and schema. And all of them I would suggest to put into your web quest. With the backdrop of Valencia, Spain, what do you think? Do you know now some of the benefits of the web quest? What was missing? Do you know how to set these up and plan them out? If not, what was missing? Will you attend part 2 on science and math? If you are, please let me know what you'd like to see more of in the Padlet. Let me see if I can share that one more time.
So Frederick, people were asking in the chat area if they could get the slide, the link to these slides. That was one question. If you want to pop that into the chat. And then they would like to know about the Adobe Spark and how you, if you're able to maybe on the next session, kind of walk people through how to work with that tool.
Perfect.
And just looking through the other chat questions.
Yeah, Edpuzzle. I see that you had a comment on Edpuzzle. I tried that out and it works really well. Edpuzzle is a way that you can stop a video and ask a question to your student for comprehension. I think it's really effective for students because a lot of the times you give them a video, but it's like, oh wait, stop, you know? So if you have a break with the Edpuzzle, you can have them ask, you can have them answer questions that you ask based on what they just learned. So it's on the spot and it's a very effective tool.
Yeah, and another question, I'm not sure if you worked with Nearpod, but there are some built-in, the virtual field trip kind of not plug-in, but you know, they're kind of already prepared type places to go that have the ability to do through it. People, there was a question about that.
Great, yeah, that would be a great place to start. I heard about Nearpod at the beginning of this lockdown thing, but I haven't really explored it. I use it for looking.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with it, but there was, if anybody wants to go back to a webinar, there was someone named Todd Wagner who did it last week, and it was recorded, and he walked through Nearpod, and that was one of the nice features of it, is that it's kind of already there for you to add in as a kind of a obviously like a web-based virtual experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be great. I know that Nearpod has a library of different types of learning experiences. I wouldn't be surprised if they also have like a web quest type or field trip. Romina mentioned that there's platforms that are not permitted. Yeah, you should check them. Yeah, check them first before you use them. Let's see.
There's so many ways though, so many tools to create the content, I guess, for students to explore. So I guess one question is, how open-ended is it in terms of where your students go? Or is it pretty much recommended, do you think, to like pre-structure the spots on the quote visit that, so you kind of pre-design it either through like linking several different sites, or like you've made your own videos? How sometimes students can kind of like really get lost on the internet.
Right.
So
Mhm.
what's your advice on that when they're doing their exploring?
Well, this is like a surprise thing, but in next week's, I'm going to put all this information together to show you how to do this on a site, like on a Google site.
Okay.
So everything's self-contained, and they have pages for the subjects, and you can scroll down. Um, it's hard to explain to you. I'm more of like a visual person, as you can tell from my types of presentations. But if you tune in next week, or if you view this series, you can hop on to the part 2, and I can show you how all of these fit with the math component and with the science component.
Great. Well, that was a good segue then.
Yeah,
Oh, Haji's here. She gave us the link to the Nearpod, our Nearpod webinar from Nice TESOL that ran last week, in case people want to
great.
poke into it. You could even just kind of fast forward to the part where there's the virtual field trips. If you want to put the slide link into the chat before we let you go, Frederick.
Yeah, sure.
It's in private messaging me. So
Yeah, I just copied the link. Okay, there's your slide. Toward the end, I gave you some resources here that I used. If you can write on the Padlet what you would like to see next time, that would be great. And once again, the wish list.
oh, I think the slides may need one of the, like the sharing. It's so annoying. I feel like I set everything and it's still like sometimes it needs access. I don't know. Depends, I guess. But if you don't mind doing that before the chat blows up here.
Right, I know.
Ah, oh yeah, okay, that looks good. We can all be viewers. That's perfect.
Yeah,
On the see, this should work.
it should work, right?
Yep.
Does it work now?
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, I see anonymous hamster and Wolverine pop up.
Oh, okay. If the Wolverines are there, you know you're good.
Yep, they're all coming through. Octopus, rabbits.
I'm gonna try now myself. Okay, yes.
Okay, so it worked, it worked. Any other lingering questions before next time? I'm really glad that you guys made the time to come and learn about this. There's lots of positive comments.
Yeah, I love our people. I've gotten to know a lot of you through these webinars, and you're like the best audience ever. I think it's going to be fun I'm definitely going to come next week. I want to see how it kind of gets threaded in.
Yeah.
And I love how you presented it across the content areas, and also with the linguistic kind of demands and progressions. And I haven't seen that Collier chart. That's really, really useful because their work is so good. And I love the WIDA stuff, but sometimes it's too bulky. This is very manageable, really good reference point.
Yeah, it's laid out on a page or two, so you can have a conversation with your math teacher about it, and they would understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good. And I just loved your story, Frederick. I didn't know that about your history. It's your leadership. I can see it. It's in the blood.
It's interesting that I learned about a lot of that Mexico-Philippine connection when I was in Mexico. Growing up, it wasn't really talked about because that galleon trade happened like years and years ago, for 250 years. Why talk about it now, right? But yeah, it was interesting for me as well. So as for you guys, if you guys are interested in something, you can set it up where you also learn as well.
Yeah, you know what, and I just want to put in here before everyone runs off is that right now, of course, I always have to promote something nice, T-Sol, so forgive me, but
Yeah, please do. Yeah, go ahead.
nice, T-Sol, we have a student contest project that is about digital stories.
Yeah.
Deadline is June 15th. I'm going to put the link into the chat. Just in case you haven't heard me talk about it or it just hasn't come to your attention, but we're going through this nominating colleagues and educators for the teacher awards, but we also have student contest projects, and it's a digital story. And it's focused on why we love New York. And so just if you happen to be playing around this week with your students and want to try out some kind of, even just the Adobe Spark, or it could be just PowerPoint, Google Slides, anything, because it's just beautiful to hear the student voice alongside the images. It's very moving, very personalized. Yeah.
The deadline is when?
Oh, June 15.
15th already? Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, well, we've been promoting it for a while, but since this related to, digital stories, I said I have to say something again about it.
Yeah.
Maybe some of you have played around with stories, and you could even just ask one of your students who really seems, very motivated or is able to spend some time this week working with one of the stories they've already done, or presentations, just kind of polishing it up, and you could submit it. So you could think about that too. Maybe one of your students, Frederick.
Yeah, I was feeling that that was directed toward me since I'm the one presenting digital stories. Sure.
Yeah, why
I'll
not?
I'll check that. Yeah, I would love for them to participate. I need to update my library of student work.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I think Danette is asking maybe about the contest. For the student projects, it's actually $100 award for your student, and for you, free conference registration. And we have 4 grade levels, grades 4 to 5, grades 6 to 8, grades high school 9 through 12, and adult or college level ESL. So there's 4 kind of tracks for that competition. So
Excellent.
yeah, so hopefully some of your students might be in there. Well, thank you so much, Frederick.
Yeah, thank you so much for this platform. I'm glad to do it. Glad to put some information out there for teachers. Hope it's really helpful. And I'll see you all next week.
Yeah, we'll see you next week, and you're welcome to take some time on the Padlet. I'm sure the Padlet will stay open.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can go over there and look at that as well, and the survey. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you.
Frederick, if I end, I think I'm going to end the meeting because I'm the host, but I recorded it, so I will get that video over to Howji. She knows it's coming now. Yay, everyone's so positive. You guys are wonderful, wonderful humans. Okay.
How can I get a transcript of the chat so I can take a look?
Okay, I can
That it disappears.
save it. I got it. I'll email it to you. If you see the chat, are you able to see the 3 dots to the right of?
Yeah, it says, yeah.
When you press that, do you have save chat as one of your things or no?
Right, it says save chat.
Okay, perfect. Then yours will work. Then it'll create a file for you. Sometimes it's a bit hard to find afterwards, but.
Laura?
Yeah.
This is Kristen Summers. I have a very, very rough web quest that I did with my students just as kind of a last day, last hurrah project. And I just wonder if the speaker might just take a quick look at it and
it's kind of give you
yeah,
feedback.
sure. My name's Frederick Lim.
I'm sorry. I'm so interested in your presentation.
Sure, I'll take a look at it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it is very primitive, but I think, let's see. I don't know if I can share my screen.
That, or you can email it to me. I don't know.
Okay.
Better.
Yeah.
My email